Thank you. All right, good morning. Happy Spring Day. It is Spring Day today. If I had flowers, I'd go around handing a flower to every lady today. And the weather's fantastic, actually. I was actually saying to Arthur just before this that, the weather's playing ball today. Because sometimes winter wants to have that late fight back, on Spring Day, and then Spring Day is terribly chilly, but today it's fantastic. Just by introduction of myself, my name is Toby Leqili. I'm the director responsible for the business and general cluster within QCTO. What that means, especially the general part, it's everything else. We've got two clusters within QCTO. The one cluster deals with engineering and the trades. So that's that Mercita, MQA space, Chieta space, food bev, because that is food production, food manufacturing. My specific unit deals with everything else: Cath Ceta, services Ceta related, bank Ceta, facet, in Ceta, my goodness, everything else. If you're familiar with the 12 SACCO learning fields, you basically exclude field 6, which deals with manufacturing, field 12 that deals with construction, and field 10 that deals with natural and earth sciences. All the other fields fall within our cluster. So within the cluster, we deal with accreditation, we deal with assessment, we deal with quality assurance, which is monitoring and evaluation. We deal with also qualification development. So the full spectrum of all the QCTO services exist within the cluster, right from qualification development, and I mean, it's the process right up until certification. So all of that happens within our cluster. Within the cluster, we've got obviously these subunits headed by deputy directors within my unit. So yeah, you'll probably liaise with a lot of my staff in relation to accreditation. So yeah, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to try and avoid going through, because I saw that a later presentation is about the legacy versus the new qualifications. So I don't want to go too much into Felicity's presentation. I'm going to deal with accreditation, especially in relation to SDPs. The fundamental issue, and this is something I just want to state up front. There's a paradigm shift and a difference between how the CETAs operated and how QCTO operates. And the reason for that is improved quality assurance. Vocational education and training is not well understood within South Africa, but it's extremely valuable. Simple example, we are in the process of establishing SafeSet, South African Institute for Vocational Education and Training. We love these long acronyms in South Africa, It's fantastic. We're in the process of incubating the institution now, presently. I remember seeing the Gazette around 2014. So it's being incubated through the Department of Higher Education and Training. In Germany, BIB, which is their federal institute, vocational institute, was established in 1969. 1969. That tells you how far behind we are when it comes to vocational education. Now, first world countries value it because it adds value in terms of your economy. It professionalizes different spaces by creating a specific standard. Remember, the qualification itself that we're discussing today creates a standard. That's a standard regardless of whether you trained in Kwakwa in the Free State or whether you trained in Sandton in Johannesburg. It doesn't matter. The qualification is the equalizer. The competency framework, which is a national competency framework, is the equalizer. It creates and it resolves the parity of esteem issue between different qualifications. It sets the standard, and your industry has done that. You started with the healthcare cleaner. It's not even that context. It's not a simple thing. I mean, my mother's in the health space. So the recovery issue, you can have a fantastic operation and then get into an environment that is not necessarily hygienic in the hospital. And that could potentially compromise you. So that qualification is important. This commercial cleaner, also important. You're professionalizing your space. There's a dignity about being part of a professional body. Just look at doctors and nurses and engineers. They've got statutory bodies. There's a pride and dignity with being in a space that is professional. But more importantly also, your clients begin to see the difference in your members in relation to that professionalism. It makes a difference. So don't ever underestimate what you're doing in your sector. It's wonderful in your space. And the irony is a lot of statutory bodies started off as non-statutory bodies. So who knows, in 20 years' time, you could be a statutory body, just to say. So just my outline of my presentation. I'm purely going to deal with the accreditation process, but I'll be here a little longer than I'd initially anticipated. I negotiated with my supervisor so that I can take additional questions that you may have that are QCTO related. Because I said, there's a lot of areas that people need to understand the shift. Before I get into the outline, I need everyone to understand the fundamental shift. For example, with the historical qualification, you would do the qualification, the CTO would go, they would monitor that context, you do your POEs, they'd send their moderators, etc., etc. There was no national assessment. The difference between this context is that there's a national assessment. And the reason for that is, once again, the parity of esteem issue and resolving that. Let me explain what I mean by parity of esteem. Let's say, for example, I was in Cape Town, and I'm a student, and I did a BCom in economics. And I did my BCom in economics at UCT. My average is 60%. And then another student did their BCom at UWC, right? Also 60%. We both applied to the employer. Both of us have got a BCom degree. Both of us have got a 60% average. Who do you think the employer is going to take? UCT. Why? The parity of esteem issue. Now, in the vocational space, it's very difficult for us to allow that parity of esteem issue to keep running and for us not to resolve it, simply because in our space, we cater for the whole country and we cater for capacity for the entire country. Now, the reason we implemented this national assessment to every single qualification is twofold. One, look at your matric certificate. No one cares if you went to Hilton College or to Hudson Park or to a small school in Kwakwa or Libote or Port Nolloth in the Northern Cape. No one cares, because there's a single national assessment. So when you go to your university, they take you on your merits. They don't say, oh, you went to this SDP, this SDP. So what it does is the national assessment creates that parity of esteem issue across the board. And that's what's fantastic about this new process. Additionally, from our perspective, we had to implement a national assessment to each qualification simply because we needed a secondary quality check. You can go to the SDP, have your formative assessment, your summative assessment, and after that, you still sit for the national assessment. The playing field is equal. All employers will recognize that occupational certificate. Once you have it in your hand, you've gone through the same quality assurance process as the SDP in Port Nolloth or the SDP in Durban, in Umhlanga. Same quality assurance process. We equalize the playing field. And the reason for that is we don't want people to do an occupational qualification and then a parity of esteem issue influences you from an SDP perspective and you are unemployed when the standards are the same. That's fundamentally the issue. So also, when it comes to accreditation, back to the topic at hand, acquiring QCTO accreditation is not the fundamental issue, like it was, for example, in the previous landscape. Maintaining your accreditation is the issue. For example, just to give you an example, last week we had a very naughty SDP. What we do is we send our quality assurance team randomly all year round. So unlike, for example, a quality assurance regime where our team will come to you to check that whatever was there at the point of accreditation is still in place, we send our team randomly all the time. They'll just arrive at your doorstep while you're teaching. They'll interview the learners. They'll interview you as an SDP. And the reason for that is we want the quality of the end product to be great. Once the quality of the end product is great, it's easy to have articulation into other spaces. But if the quality of the product is compromised because of unscrupulous SDPs in the space, our job as a regulatory entity is to root them out. That is our job. That's why the regime is totally different. Last week, I won't name the name of the SDP, but the specific SDP was accredited by us. They didn't expect our staff to pitch up because we had sent our staff around February. So I think they were under the impression that we'll go once a year. Sometimes we go 3 times a year. We have to, and we can't tell you, oh, we are coming so that you window dress everything. We arrive there, everything is perfect. 2 days later, whatever you had rented to look great is gone, and then the students, it looks terrible. So we randomly do that because we are about wonderful and great standards for our citizens. Our primary objective is to protect the learner and the integrity of their qualification. That's fundamentally it. So I don't want you to be alarmed. It's just part of the quality assurance regime. So acquiring the accreditation is not the issue. Our process, you'll see, it's a very systematic, compliance-driven process, but maintaining it is a different story. So the SDP, for example, I was telling you about last week, trained learners on 190 credit qualification. We sent our monitors during that curriculum implementation phase. We sent them again later on in the year. Now, you can't train learners from February to November. This is 10 months on 190 credit qualification, which is longer than a year. That's about a year and a half. They trained learners for only 10 months. They went through the ISA, and this is a big provider. They basically feature in all provinces. They had 400 learners writing the ISA, all 400 failed. All 400 failed. So we sent our investigators to go have a look. What's the problem? They have not kept to the guidelines in the curriculum document. They have not kept to the credit specifications. The credits is the duration. If it's 190 credits, there's a reason why. They didn't even put the learners through a workplace experience component because that's how you learn. It's that applied knowledge. It's important that you do that. And unfortunately for them, I mean, we have to rescind their accreditation. We have to protect the learner. The learner, the parents are spending money. The system itself is spending money on those learners. And we have to make sure that those learners are successful. We want to see them successful. We want to see them getting into the work market. We want to see them adding value in the work market. That's very important to us. QCTO, the way we'll be able to assess QCTO 5 to 10 years from now is those learners getting into the workplace who have an occupational certificate. When we do our surveys of all employers across the country, employers would be saying, these learners that have got this occupational certificate are really fantastic in our work environment. Then QCTO would have done its job. All right, let's go to the content quickly then. So I'm going to go through the types of accreditation offered, accreditation process itself, the links that we send SDPs in terms of that process, just generically learner enrollment basically, some of the accreditation challenges, and then just a quick Q&A session. I am presenting on the accreditation process, but like I said, I'm going to stay just a little bit longer. So any other questions in terms of assessment, in terms of how we do our monitoring and evaluation processes right up until certification, I'll be able to field any of those before I have to jet off back to the office. All right, so these are our accreditation types. We've got the new qualifications, the occupational qualification, the part qualification, and we've got the skills programs. These are the 3 new types. Even if you look at the new OQSF document, it's available. I have sent the presentation to Felicity, so hopefully they can email it to everyone. I think this is important. I've tried to make it not too wordy and generic and simple enough so that you can use this presentation at your respective SDPs or entities to discuss it with others within your context so that it makes sense. So yeah, don't stress, I'll go through everything. And then of course we've got the historically registered qualifications. That's the historical qualification that was mentioned. As you know, in 2020, there was a ministerial determination published giving a specific time frame in terms of the historical qualifications. It stated that all of these have to be, in essence, deactivated from the system from the 30th of June 2023. It then gives a teach-out period of, a learner enrollment period for a year from 2023 to 2024. It therefore means from the 1st of July 2024, there will be no learner who's able to be put onto a historical qualification. And that's a big deal across the context, the entire space. It's the first time the minister put specific dates in a determination. And the reason for that, colleagues, is that there's no country that can afford to run a dual system, a historical system and a new system at the same time. One, it's confusing for the citizens. It's extremely confusing. And if it's confusing for the citizens, implementation becomes a problem. So that's the first thing. The second thing, running a dual system is extremely expensive. You have to have a single quality assurance system. Those qualifications in terms of the competency framework are constantly updated and meeting any innovation that needs to happen in that context. It's very, very important. So yeah. So in terms of our historical, we're talking about the legacy trays, the provider-based qualifications, the unit standard-based qualifications, the NATED, N4 to N6, also within our context, and also the historical skills programs. The historical skills programs, because remember, those ones have got unit standards in them. So if the qualification is being deactivated, the unit standards within those will also then obviously be deactivated. In terms of the process, we have an online application on our website. You go onto that platform, you fill everything in that you need to fill in. There's a bit of a time delay between the screens, okay. You fill everything that you need to fill. It's online. The reason it's online is previously it wasn't online and things would fall between the cracks. When it's on a digital platform, it's digitally in the system. We know when the application come in. We have a 90-day turnaround time from the point in which you, as a provider, load your data to us. And the reason for that is that in the past, we would, providers would send in an application. We send you a link, right? I'll go into that detail. We sent them the link, and then a provider would sit for a month, for 2 months, for 3 months, not loading the data. Our staff would be sending emails. Please load it's the compliance-related documents. Please load the documents. What happens from us, it started to code audit queries for us. We've got a 90-day turnaround time. If your application sits for longer than 90 days, it's an audit query for us. So what we do is, we send you the link, we send you a couple of reminders. If you're not loading the data, we send you an email to say, please reapply when you are ready. We have noticed some providers put in the application because we're not yet charging fees. And we've noticed that. And what happens is they put in an application when they're not even ready yet. They haven't really got the facilitators in place. They don't have, for example, an MOU with the employer that they will utilize for the work experience component. And that becomes problematic from our perspective. So we unfortunately do have to send you an email saying, please then reapply when you're ready. Once you load your data onto our system and we receive it, we acknowledge it, and then we schedule the site verification. All of that process right up until accreditation. We schedule the site verification. After the site verification, it goes to our accreditation committee. After accreditation committee, you get your accreditation letter. The process itself, within 90 days, we say 90 days, but the process is generally much quicker than that. And the reason for that is, if we look at the landscape, before QCTO was established, The reason it's established is because there were different mechanisms and different time frames between every SETA. One SETA would be 3 months, another SETA will be 9 months. I know Facet increased theirs to 18 months, for example. Now what happens is that if, let's say for example, you're a TVET college or an SDP that is offering qualifications in 6 different sectors. One application will go in at the same time. Within 3 months you're accredited, you're rolling it out, your business is moving. We want sustainable STPs. We don't want STPs that are not sustainable. So our job is to make sure that the bureaucracy is removed, everything is on an online platform, and we get you accreditation as soon as possible so training can happen. That's our job. That's what we need to do. If we're not doing it, you hold us accountable to that. So within 90 days, once you put in, or you give us the documents that we need through the links that we send, we process everything within 90 days. In the past 2 years, we've kept to the 90 days of all the STPs that load their data on time. So the ball is also in your hands. Remember, communication is a two-way stream. You have certain responsibilities as an STP, we have certain responsibilities as a regulatory entity. So that's generically the process. We send the links to the applicants, and these are all the compliance documents. I'll go through those. Applications are uploaded to us. These are the compliance documents, your OHS audit report, proof of ownership or lease agreement, your facilitator CVs, qualifications, IDs, proof of financial stability. We have to have a look at that because we think of the learners, remember, we need sustainable STPs. So we have a developmental approach. We actually want STPs to prosper. We want you to grow. We want you to be consistently in the space, because the reality is our public entities, in terms of educational institutions, cannot cater for the numbers. I worked at University of Pretoria for years. If you look at the number of applications received and the number of learners that can be taken throughout the educational institution space, it's a fraction of the number that we need to train. If you look at what is called the NEET population, not in employment and education, around 2009 it was still around 2.6 million. It's grown now to around 9 million. Some people are saying the data is a bit sketchy. It should be actually around 11 million. Now, that's an untapped labor force sitting there waiting to be reskilled, upskilled, and given certain competencies. And once you do that for your citizens, they add value to your society. I actually jokingly, well, it's a joke, but I mean it's real. I said to my team, you guys are crime fighters, and they were all surprised. What, Mr. Qili is losing his mind. Crime fighters. I said, if you upskill your citizens and they get gainful employment or are self-employed, they don't loiter to do crime. They're not desperate to feed their families. So the more people we get into employment in this country and you allow them to be active citizens, the less social ills like crime. Crime is a social ill. That's my sociology background coming through a little bit. But it's a social problem. So it's important that we train our citizens, we professionalize our citizens across the various sectors. The one point I want to raise in terms of the learning material, it has to be aligned to the matrix. If you go and look at the competency framework, which we call our curriculum document, it outlines what you need as an STP per module. You go, that for an STP, the curriculum document is your Bible. Because also, remember, the qualification can stay on the system, and we registered them for 5 years, right? It can be re-registered after 5 years, re-registered another 5 years. It could stay on the system for 10, 20, 15 years. Germany went for a spell when they weren't developing any new occupational qualifications for a long time, because their focus was always on the competency framework, making sure it's always updated. So the qualification itself, if you've noticed, the module names are very generic. So you can keep the qualification on the system, so you don't have to keep going through a development process, because it's a long process. It needs all the stakeholders in the country coming through to develop that content. But the competency framework, every time there's a new theme within that competency framework, we can update that because it's just on our website. It doesn't have to be on the NLRD. It's the same thing. Anyone here who's been in the higher education space knows that every single semester, your content changes. If you are teaching Politics 101, the Politics 101 module that you taught in the first semester is different in the second semester, if you are really a decent tutor or lecturer. Because what you do is, your themes, you are constantly reading up on the latest in your field, in your discipline. You're constantly updating those themes. So what your learners wrote on in the first semester will be different in the second semester. If they perhaps have failed in the first semester and second semester and they have to repeat it the next year, it's totally different content. It's still Political Science 101. It's still pegged at a specific NQF level in terms of the degree of complexity, but it has changed. It's different. It's the same thing with the competency framework. The curriculum document, we can always update it and make sure in your specific sector, it's always up to date without having to go through that process. So we register them for 5 years. When the re-registration process comes and the content, all of you are still happy with it, we re-register it for another 5 years. And it stays on the system, and we have some type of continuity in terms of the training. In terms of the evaluation process, just for you to understand what we go through, we first have a desktop evaluation in terms of everything that you've sent us, to just check that everything's there. After that, it's the site verification that I spoke about. So we send subject matter experts. I must take this opportunity just to say, in your space, on our website, we've got applications to be a subject matter expert for QCTO, for every single profession across the country. Remember, you can't have one national organization having the expertise in everything. We've got about 630 qualifications, from retail to science-related ones to ICT-related qualifications. So we're always wanting subject matter experts on our database to assist us with our functions. So any individual is interested to be a QCTO verifier for accreditation purposes, for assessment, all those type of things. You can go onto our website, you can load your CV and apply to be a QCTO verifier. And then we always want a subject matter expert doing the verification, or even if maybe there's an investigation from an ISA perspective, we need a subject matter expert there. I once went to an SDP in Mpumalanga, Leidenburg, and the SDP was so proud showing me that one of their learners' exams, and perhaps they thought I wouldn't read the content. So I took it and I read the content. Now, this was an auxiliary nursing qualification. It was already moderated by the specific seater that I will not name. But the questions in there, one of the questions was to name the 3 types of plowing. What does plowing have to do? And when I saw that, and this learner, by the way, received 98%. It's like asking a civil engineer to tell you about the anatomy of a dog, like a veterinary sciences person. It's so abstract. So it tells me that the person who went there might have been an assessor and moderator, but was not a subject matter expert. So from a compliance perspective, it was tick, 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 compliance. But they didn't check the content as a subject matter expert. And that's why, we always saying, every month we actually sit and go through the process of acquiring more and more verifiers. I said to my supervisor, Mr. Lat, I said, even if at some point we have 100,000 verifiers, we've got so many occupations, we need a massive pool of subject matter experts. Not just pure generic people, but subject matter experts in that specific field. Actual practitioners. And for me, that is the fundamental difference between our current regime. And then we have the physical site verification. After the site verification, it goes to our accreditation committee, and then you receive an outcome, whether positive or negative. If your outcome is negative, you still have an appeals process that you can send the appeal through our accreditation email address. That also goes to our appeals committee, and then you will get an outcome in relation to that. So that's generically the process. These are the links for the various qualification types that I mentioned earlier on. We've got links for the historically registered qualifications in terms of letters of intent, for the actual occupational qualifications and part qualifications, a separate one for the skills programs, and then obviously one for the NATED N4 to N6 like I'd mentioned, and then separate application for the assessment centers. So all of these links are available. Even if you require them, we can send them to anyone at any time. I could send it to Felicity and she could send it to all of you to have those links. That link will send you straight to our website where you can load for the different application types. In terms of learner enrollment, it's important, I have to state this, after you are accredited by QCTO, the moment you get a single learner enrolled, you have to notify us within 21 days. You can't enroll learners, train, and then come at the end and say you want to have an ISA. You have to notify us within 21 days of enrolling a learner, because our quality assurance regime kicks in once you enroll the learner. We have to, remember I said we're developmental in nature. This is a new process for a lot of STPs. Some of our teams, we send them and they actually, during that curriculum implementation phase, before your learners go and sit for an ISA and fail, for example, we come in there, we see what you're doing. If maybe you're going off you're moving in the wrong way in terms of the implementation, we assist you to say, no, this is how you implement. And what we found that when we do send our monitors to do that, the learners are successful in the end, and that's what we all want. The SDP wants success, we want success. We want those learners to do well. So if you don't inform us and then come at the end for the ISA, and already we keep telling SDPs this, immediately within the 21 days, inform us. We are developmental, yes, we are a regulatory entity, but we're also developmental in nature. We're not coming there to shut you down. Our objective, we don't sit there at QCTO and think, oh, lovely, who are we going to shut down now? I mean, it would also defeat the point, because we want more SDPs so that we can train more of our citizens. Are you with me? But we do want SDPs to do the right thing. And it's not difficult. Our compliance standards are not difficult. That's why we are very hard on unscrupulous providers. Because, I mean, I remember, even when I was still working at SAQA, we had a provider that wasn't accredited anyway. And it was retired professors that were training at that SDP. So in terms of competence, when those learners went through an RPL process, they did very well, which actually told you that they were actually getting decent training. And all that SDP had to do was just do the right thing in terms of the compliance for accreditation. That's it. It's not difficult. It's not expensive at all in relation to our space. We don't charge, like maybe other quality councils, massive amounts. It's reasonable. So the accreditation process is not painful. But our quality assurance regime is strict. We have to make sure we protect the learners. We have to make sure that unscrupulous providers are rooted out of our space. Once we do that, quality is key. If you go and look up the definition of quality, you'll find that quality is very difficult to define, because quality varies from one person to another. But you know a quality product when you see it. So what we do is we put in a process in place that will end in a quality product. And that's this new quality assurance regime. We trust that process will lead to a quality end product. Okay. Two things, like I'd mentioned, the 21 days for the qualifications, and then it's within 5 days for the skills programs. within 5 days, because the skills programs are far shorter. So as soon as you have a single learner enrolled, you notify QCTO. Those are the two crucial things here. And then also learner enrollment, there are 2 phases. I think you'll look at the content. I've tried to at least make it make sense for you so that when you get the presentation, it will also make sense for you. Just to load the learners onto our system so that certification doesn't become a problem later on. This is just a few of the challenges that we've noticed. Sometimes the use of the links is an issue, but we do have staff that liaise with the STPs right through. And we find that it's usually software not speaking to each other. I mean, if you're using Linux and we're using Microsoft Office, it does cause a bit of an issue. But we find ways to resolve those issues. Non-responsiveness of the applicants, as I'd mentioned, we have a 90-day turnaround time. We can't afford for you to sit on the system without being processed. And then this is a bit of an issue that we've noticed in the space. A lot of STPs are using consultants for the accreditation. What we've noticed with this is that the consultant will come, they will assist you to acquire accreditation, but they will not tell you how to implement this new occupational qualification. We actually were saying that you should apply yourself. We should come and verify you ourselves, because in that process, you're learning what you need to actually know. If you only use a consultant and the consultant goes, when we send our team, we've realized our monitoring and evaluation team consistently is giving us feedback that we arrive at this SDP, they don't understand our processes because they didn't do it themselves, because they're reliant on only consultants. So that's the negative part. I had to mention it. It is a challenge for, not only for us, it's a challenge for you as an SDP. Go through the process yourself. Look at our policy document. Our policies are very, very straightforward. Look at our guidelines. We've got guidelines linked to each policy. Look at those processes. I promise you it is not difficult. It's not insurmountable. It's just a compliance process and you get accreditation. Like I said, accreditation is not the big issue. Maintaining your accreditation is the issue. So from my side, do note QCTO processes are not CETA processes. We are making that fundamental shift. I think it's an exciting time for us as a country because we'll be training our citizens on updated content. The world is talking about 4th Industrial Revolution, 5th Industrial Revolution. I was reading an article the other day that stated that the 4th Industrial Revolution will be 20 years, unlike the previous 3 that were 100 years each. Now, if it started in 2010, it means 2030 we'll be moving into the 5th Industrial Revolution. It means we can't train our citizens on content from 2002 and 2003 or 2007. We need to train them on 2022 content. Very important. I went to London with our CEO in 2018 before this whole COVID craziness started. And I was extremely sad when I was at Heathrow Airport coming back. It just dawned on me that how far behind we are when it comes to this 4th Industrial Revolution. I got to Heathrow and there were no tellers, no one assisting, those attendants helping you load your bags, etc., etc. Everything was machines. I got there, I put my stuff in the system, it brought out those tags, I put the tags on my bag myself and it went. And the only thing that for me was worrying is when I arrived in South Africa and I saw all those unemployed people who don't know that they are unemployed. Very, very sad. Because remember, a 4th Industrial Revolution or any industrial revolution never waits for that country to catch up. It just moves. Those of you who remember cassettes, we had cassettes, they are gone. We had CDs. People now are using Apple, they're using Spotify. There's many different mechanisms. We don't talk about CDs anymore. When Blu-ray came out, it was, oh, wonderful. The 4th Industrial Revolution waits for no country. It moves. We also have to move to make sure we train our citizens with the right type of training. Thank you, colleagues.